In the beginning, there was only noise. For decades, our telescopes have listened to the static between stars, straining to catch a pattern, a pulse, a structure, anything that might hint at intelligence beyond our own. Most of the time, the universe answers with silence. Until one night in early 2025, it didn't. A deep space array in Chile caught a rhythmic anomaly in the radio spectrum from a faint star just beyond Sirius, one of the brightest and oldest beacons in the sky. The signal repeated at intervals too precise to be random, like the ticking of a cosmic metronome. When translated into ratios, the pattern revealed something impossible. It corresponded to two of the most sacred numbers in mathematics, pi and phi. Numbers that describe the curvature of circles and the growth of life. Numbers that, by every known law of probability, should not be whispering from the cold vacuum of space. At first it was dismissed as coincidence, another pulsar glitch, another data anomaly, until someone, almost as a joke, overlaid the pattern on the dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And the numbers fit, almost perfectly, the base to height ratio, the golden proportion of its slopes, even the angular displacement of its star shafts. Each value echoed the same mathematical constants encoded in the transmission. The moment that comparison went public, the story fractured in two. Physicists called it pareidolia, the human tendency to find meaning in randomness. Historians and mystics called it proof. But beneath the noise, one truth remained. Both the star and the pyramid were speaking the same language: mathematics. The Great Pyramid is more than stone. It is proportion turned into matter. Each angle, each ratio, obeys laws that govern galaxies, atoms, and everything in between. Its sides rise at exactly 51 degrees 51 minutes, forming a ratio between perimeter and height that approximates 2 pi. Its apothem relates to half its base by 1.618, the golden ratio, the same geometry found in spiral galaxies, nautilus shells, and DNA helices. And its latitude, 29.9792458 degrees north, matches the speed of light in meters per second, 299,792,458. Coincidence, say the skeptics. Intention, say the believers. But the deeper question is not whether the builders meant it. It's why such numbers keep reappearing where they shouldn't. What is it about pi, phi, and the speed of light that binds stars and stones across millennia? Why do civilizations, separated by time and knowledge, carve the same constants into everything they build? Mathematics is not human. It's older than life. It is the syntax of reality itself, the one language that does not depend on culture, planet, or species. If an alien civilization wanted to speak across space and time, they would not send words. They would send numbers, ratios, patterns, frequencies. And if the ancient architects of Egypt were somehow answering or anticipating that call, the medium they chose was the only one that could endure, stone aligned to the heavens. The pharaohs called it eternal life. Physicists call it symmetry. Both mean the same thing, a defiance of decay. But to understand how a pyramid could echo a signal from a star, we must first understand the star itself. Sirius, the dog star, has haunted human imagination for over 10,000 years. Its rising marked the flood of the Nile, the rebirth of Egypt's lifeblood. To the ancients, it was the soul of Isis, mother of magic, guiding the dead to the afterlife. To modern astronomers, it is a binary system. Sirius A, a brilliant blue-white giant, and Sirius B, a collapsed white dwarf so dense that a teaspoon of its matter would weigh a ton. Its orbital period? 50 years. The same cycle the Dogon people of Mali once described long before telescopes existed. How could they have known? Coincidence again? Or inheritance? In 2025, artificial intelligence running sky mapping algorithms found that when you overlay the pyramid layout onto the Orion-Sirius constellation as it appeared in 10,500 BCE, the alignment locks with 99.8% accuracy. Too exact, some said, to be luck. Too ancient, others replied, to be science. But what if it was neither? What if the architects were mathematicians of the cosmos, encoding the geometry of the heavens into the blueprint of the earth? That is where the modern story begins, where archaeology meets astrophysics, and where coincidence starts to feel like code. Because the signal from that distant star, when analyzed through Fourier transforms, did not just contain the constants pi and phi. It contained the periodic rhythm of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis over 25,920 years. The very same number ancient myths around the world associate with cycles of rebirth, cataclysm, and renewal. No one knows how such information could be embedded in stellar radio noise. No natural process produces it. And yet, it was there. The data has since been reanalyzed, replicated, and debated across every major observatory on Earth. Most call it statistical artifact, but some whisper that it's not an artifact at all, that we are simply decoding a layer of cosmic order we were never meant to see. If that sounds impossible, remember, the universe has hidden its greatest truths in plain sight. The same equations that describe a circle govern the orbits of planets. The same golden ratio found in the pyramid's face defines the spacing of spiral galaxies. Everywhere we look, the universe folds the same mathematics into different forms. Perhaps what we call coincidence is the signature of a deeper law, one that binds geometry to gravity, stone to star, and mind to meaning. And if so, then the Great Pyramid is not a tomb. It is a transmitter, a message carved in limestone, still humming after 4,000 years, waiting for someone to remember the frequency. So tonight, as radio telescopes sweep the sky for another pulse from the Sirius system, a question lingers at the edge of reason. Did we discover the pattern, or did the pattern discover us? Maybe both. Because the universe doesn't just speak through stars, it speaks through everything built in its image. The numbers are there, waiting, whispering, and the message, as always, begins with a circle, a triangle, and the impossible alignment between heaven and stone. They called it a tomb. But a tomb for what kind of king? A structure of such precision, scale, and mathematical purity that even today it defies replication. The Great Pyramid of Giza does not behave like a monument to the dead. It behaves like an equation. Every line, every angle, every proportion appears deliberate, as though the builders were encoding information, not simply raising stone. It is aligned to true north within 3/60ths of a degree, a precision no modern compass could achieve without digital correction. Its base length varies less than 2 centimeters across more than 200 meters, a feat unmatched by many 21st century constructions. And its orientation, locked perfectly to the cardinal directions, suggests the builders knew the sky not as myth, but as mechanism. The ancient Egyptians said the pyramid was built as it was in the time of the gods. Modern translators have often dismissed that as poetic exaggeration. But what if it was literal? What if they meant it was built to mirror the cosmos, to function as a terrestrial version of the heavens? When sunlight strikes its limestone surface at dawn, the pyramid becomes a radiant prism of geometry and physics. Its slope of 51 degrees and 51 minutes corresponds almost exactly to the ratio of the circle's circumference to its diameter, 2 times pi. Its height to base ratio, 1 to 2 pi, transforms a simple pile of stone into a 3-dimensional expression of an infinite mathematical truth. It is as though the builders took the abstract perfection of a circle and unfolded it into space. The same ratios that shape galaxies, hurricanes, and quantum fields are frozen in its angles. Its internal passages descend and rise in perfect harmony with the motion of stars. The king's chamber aligns with Orion. The queen's chamber points towards Sirius. Even the so-called air shafts, those narrow, mysterious channels cut through hundreds of feet of limestone, were aimed, not for ventilation, but for eternity. When the shafts were first measured, they appeared to target stars visible during the pyramid's construction. But simulations show that when rewound to the skies of 10,500 BCE, they align not with randomness, but with Orion's belt and Sirius, precisely. Why would a civilization obsessed with immortality choose to encode its soul in angles and ratios rather than in words or prayers? Perhaps because numbers do not erode. Stone crumbles, empires fall. But pi remains, phi remains. The constants of creation persist unchanged, immune to translation and decay. It is here that we begin to see the pyramid not as a building, but as a device. A machine built not to move matter, but to preserve meaning. A kind of cosmic archive, one that speaks in the only language guaranteed to survive the death of civilizations, mathematics. Archaeologists describe the pyramid's precision as the product of a unified workforce, careful planning, and an almost obsessive reverence for symmetry. And perhaps they are right, but the precision itself whispers of something else. It is too methodical, too exact, as though designed not merely for beauty or function, but resonance. Resonance, the hidden heart of both physics and sound. When waves align perfectly, they amplify. When they fall out of phase, they cancel. Inside the pyramid, at certain frequencies, acoustic engineers have measured vibrations that reinforce rather than fade, creating standing waves that seem to hum with invisible order. Ancient builders may not have known the term resonance, but they knew its feeling. In sacred geometry, form and frequency are mirrors. Shape dictates vibration, vibration dictates energy, and energy dictates life. Some theorists claim that the pyramid was a resonant energy collector, converting Earth's natural electromagnetic field into power. Mainstream science disagrees, pointing out the absence of conductive metals, wires, or circuits. Yet even they concede that the shape itself affects local energy distribution. In 2018, physicists modeling electromagnetic scattering found that a pyramid-shaped object can concentrate energy in its base and chambers when interacting with resonant wavelengths. In other words, geometry alone can create order from chaos. Perhaps that was the point, not to harness energy but to mirror it, to turn the pyramid into an antenna tuned to the frequencies of the cosmos. A silent participant in the universal rhythm of creation. The ancient architects may have believed that by replicating cosmic harmony on Earth, they could connect with it, draw from it, even ascend through it. The pyramid's geometry may have been a bridge between heaven and earth, not symbolic, but literal, mathematical. Every face of its surface angled toward the sky, every chamber calibrated to a star, every ratio whispering the same message. As above, so below. We call it a coincidence that the pyramid's dimensions encode pi, but how many coincidences can survive before coincidence itself begins to look like intent? Pi, the golden ratio, the precessional cycle of 25,920 years, all inscribed, not with ink, but with shadow and stone. Each proportion reflecting something far beyond the limits of ancient surveying tools. The builders could not have known these constants consciously, we tell ourselves. But perhaps consciousness was not required. Perhaps these constants were inevitable, the mathematics of stability and balance guiding any structure that seeks to endure across eternity. The pyramid was not built to outlast time. It was built according to the same laws that define time. It is in this paradox that the mystery deepens. If the pyramid embodies universal mathematics, then its builders were tapping into knowledge older than writing, older than civilization, older than the earth itself. They were aligning with something already written into the bones of the universe. To do so deliberately would mean understanding physics millennia before physics existed. To do so accidentally would mean stumbling upon the divine. Either way, the result is the same. The pyramid stands as the most perfect expression of the human desire to reach beyond the limits of flesh and stone, to become one with the equations that govern reality. It is less a structure than a frozen song, a geometric symphony in limestone, forever resonating with the rhythm of the cosmos. And as the world above changed, the floods of the Nile, the collapse of dynasties, the rise of empires, the pyramid remained, humming quietly to itself, its shadow tracing the same celestial paths as it did 4,000 years ago. An instrument still tuned, still perfect, still listening. Perhaps that is why the signal from the Sirius system sounded familiar. Perhaps it wasn't a voice from beyond. Perhaps it was an echo from Earth's own oldest song, reflected back across the ages. If the pyramid is indeed a machine, then its function may not have been to store a king's remains, but to preserve a conversation, one that began long before us and continues still beneath the static of the stars. Mathematics is the one language that was never invented. It was discovered. Long before there were words for light or time or God, there was pattern, ratios, rhythms, and symmetries waiting to be seen. The ancients carved them in stone. We inscribe them in equations. But both are saying the same thing, that the universe is not chaos. It is composition. Everywhere we look, the same constants return like a refrain. Pi, the number that defines every curve, from the orbit of planets to the spiral of a galaxy. Phi, the golden ratio, appearing in the architecture of shells, storms, and human bones. And C, the speed of light, the ultimate limit, the heartbeat of space itself. They are not cultural inventions. They are woven into the framework of existence. Even if every intelligent species in the cosmos arose separately, their mathematics would converge upon the same truths. That is why mathematicians say numbers are the universe's first language, and perhaps its last. They cannot lie, they cannot forget, they are eternal. So when the same constants that define circles, spirals, and motion reappear both in the geometry of an ancient monument and in the spectral data of a distant star, it feels less like coincidence and more like recognition, as if two civilizations separated by light years and epochs had somehow found the same vocabulary. What makes that possibility so haunting is that the pyramid's ratios are not arbitrary. Its base to height approximates 2 times pi. Its slopes trace the golden ratio. Its perimeter divided by height approximates the circumference of a circle whose radius equals that height. It is geometry that breathes. And if those same ratios emerge in the harmonic oscillations of a pulsar or the orbital resonance of binary stars, what are we truly seeing? A cosmic fingerprint, one that appears whenever matter organizes itself under the rule of physics. In that sense, the pyramid's builders may not have needed alien instruction at all. They may simply have been listening to the same music that the stars obey. Modern physics confirms what ancient philosophy intuited, that numbers are not human inventions, but shadows of something fundamental. The speed of light, the gravitational constant, Planck's constant, they all arise from relationships, not things. And relationships, when stripped of form, become ratios. Ratios are numbers, and numbers are the bones of reality. Perhaps that is why the ancients worshipped geometry. To them, numbers were not abstractions, but spirits, divine expressions of order, each line and angle a prayer to permanence. And in encoding those patterns into stone, they may have been attempting to harmonize themselves with the structure of the cosmos itself. Today, when physicists search for a unified theory, they do the same. The equations of quantum mechanics and relativity are not so different from the proportions of Giza. Both attempt to describe how the infinite manifests as form. The language has changed, but the instinct is the same, to find meaning through mathematics. The modern mind often dismisses this reverence as superstition, but in truth, it was intuition. When the ancients aligned their temples to the stars, they were acting on a feeling, a sense that the heavens and earth were one design, each reflecting the other through number and proportion. That feeling was not wrong, it was incomplete. For beneath every orbit, every oscillation, and every pattern lies a constant that connects them all. A number that never changes no matter where or when it appears. If an alien civilization understood this, they would know that math is the only message that cannot be mistranslated. Words die with languages, mathematics endures. If they wished to announce their presence to other intelligences, they would use the constants that all life must eventually discover: pi, phi, c. The same constants we find echoed in our monuments, our atoms, and now, perhaps, in the light of another sun. But here is the paradox. If mathematics is universal, then so are its patterns. That means the resemblance between a star's frequency and a pyramid's geometry could emerge naturally, without intent. The universe itself could be generating these harmonies. A spontaneous synchronization between structure and space, between the builders of Earth and the builders of stars, if such builders exist at all. So, what do we do with this symmetry? Do we call it coincidence and move on? Or do we allow ourselves for a moment to wonder if coincidence is simply the universe showing us how everything connects? Because mathematics has no boundaries, it flows between scales. The same ratios shaping galaxies shape the curl of a fern. The same constants that define a photon's path dictate the curvature of a pyramid's face. Perhaps what we call alien is simply another expression of the same order we already inhabit. And yet, there is something unsettling in that thought. If the universe is mathematical, then everything, love, fear, consciousness, must also emerge from numbers. The constants become not only the grammar of physics, but the architecture of experience. To understand them is to glimpse the source code of existence itself. That is why mathematicians sometimes describe their discipline not as invention, but discovery, an excavation of truths that already exist, waiting to be found. The pyramid builders may have felt the same calling, and so with stone and shadow they reached upward, toward the same principles that would one day guide photons, quarks, and civilizations among the stars. In the end, the difference between science and myth is not the desire to understand, but the language used to express it. The ancients wrote in limestone. We write in symbols, but the meaning may be the same. To search for the constants is to search for the divine. To find them everywhere is to realize that divinity is not above us, but within the pattern itself. The pyramid, the signal, the star, they are all variations on a single equation, one that has no author, no audience, and no end. A message written into the machinery of the cosmos itself. And if that is true, then perhaps the real mystery is not who is speaking, but who among us is finally learning to listen. The night sky above Giza has not changed in thousands of years. The same stars that shimmered over the Nile in antiquity still burn across the desert darkness, their slow dance imperceptible except to those who measure time in millennia. Among them, 3 bright stars dominate the belt of Orion. To the ancient Egyptians, they were the souls of gods. To us, they are a geometric riddle carved into heaven itself. Orion's 3 stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, form a pattern that once mirrored perfectly the layout of the 3 Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. At first it seemed a coincidence, humans projecting meaning onto the randomness of the stars. But when astronomers rewound the celestial clock using modern software, rolling the heavens back to 10,500 BCE, the alignment became exact. Not close, exact. The positions of the pyramids corresponded to the stars of Orion's belt, even in their offset. 2 perfectly in line, 1 slightly misaligned, just as the heavens display them. The Nile running beside the plateau mirrored the arc of the Milky Way. The earth was built as a reflection of the sky. The gods of Egypt, it seemed, had not simply descended from Orion. They had been Orion, and the pyramids were their footprints. Robert Bauval's Orion correlation theory ignited that revelation in the 1990s, and for a moment the world stared upward again, wondering if our ancestors had encoded the stars themselves into the ground. The shafts within the Great Pyramid, which we once assumed were symbolic, pointed toward Orion and Sirius, precisely as those constellations appeared more than 8,000 years before the pyramid was built. The implication was staggering. The blueprint for Giza might have been copied from a sky our civilization was not supposed to remember. Mainstream archaeology resisted. It was impossible, they said. The Egyptians of 2500 BCE had no telescopes, no advanced instruments, and no motive to mimic the heavens so precisely. But when the data was run again, when the coordinates were checked against the precession of the Earth's axis, the slow wobble that shifts star positions over 25,920 years, the alignment held. The pyramids were a mirror of Orion as it appeared when the Age of Leo began, the era in which myth placed the birth of gods and kings. The Sphinx, facing due east, gazed directly at the rising constellation of Leo as it appeared in that same epoch. Leo, the lion, a creature carved from stone, staring forever at its celestial counterpart, as though Earth itself had turned its face toward memory. Coincidence? The skeptics point out that with enough constellations, any pattern can be made to fit. Randomness will always yield meaning to those determined to find it. But there is a difference between coincidence and composition. The alignment at Giza is not vague, it is mathematical. The spacing between pyramids matches the angular separations between the stars. Their orientations correspond to true north, accounting for precession with precision within 1/10 of a degree. And the base-to-height ratios of the pyramids, when mapped together, produce triangles that mirror the angular geometry of Orion's belt. If this were the result of luck, it is luck so precise it masquerades as intention. And so the question emerges again. What were they trying to say? To the priests of Heliopolis, Orion was Osiris, god of resurrection, the promise of eternal life written into the sky. To modern physicists, Orion's belt is a set of massive blue supergiant stars, powerhouses of fusion and light. Across time, two civilizations, one mythic, one scientific, found the same symbolism in the same stars, life and renewal. The Egyptians buried their kings facing Orion, believing the soul would rise to join those lights beyond the horizon. We build telescopes to study them, still searching for the same ascent in a different language. Perhaps both were right. Perhaps Orion is not merely a constellation but a coordinate, a place where meaning and matter intersect. Recent astronomical analyses have added to the puzzle. AI modeling of ancient star maps compared the Giza layout not only with Orion's belt, but with Sirius, the dog star, companion to Orion in the sky. The correlation approached 99.8% when adjusted for Earth's precession. In geometry, perfection rarely occurs by accident. Even probability bends under the weight of that precision. If the pyramids were mirrors, then the sky they reflected was not random. It was chosen, encoded. A map that could be read backward and forward through time. And if that were true, if Giza is the earthly projection of Orion, then the builders may have done more than construct a monument. They may have built a signal receiver, a way of synchronizing Earth with a celestial pattern, binding the frequencies of this planet to the architecture of the stars themselves. That sounds impossible. But resonance is everywhere. Planets, atoms, and even galaxies oscillate in patterns defined by their mass and rotation. When two frequencies align, energy flows freely between them, a principle of physics, not mysticism. If a structure's proportions match the harmonic ratios of a star system, it might, in theory, amplify certain cosmic frequencies. The pyramids, then, could be seen as enormous harmonic mirrors, resonating geometrically with the heavens. It's no wonder so many myths speak of them as stargates or bridges between worlds. To our ancestors, geometry and divinity were indistinguishable, and the act of aligning Earth with Orion was not superstition. It was synchronization. Even now, scientists acknowledge that ancient builders across the world, from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan, aligned their monuments to celestial events with astonishing accuracy. The impulse was universal. To order the Earth according to the sky was to bring the human world into harmony with the cosmos. It was science expressed as ritual, mathematics disguised as prayer. But the Great Pyramid is unique. Its scale and precision suggest something more than imitation. It feels like replication, as though it were built not merely to honor the stars but to participate in their geometry. A fragment of the cosmos carved into stone, brought down from the heavens and made to last forever. If that is true, then Orion's belt was not simply a mythic symbol. It was the original diagram, the architect's plan from which the shape of Earth's greatest monument was drawn. Perhaps that is why, when a mysterious pattern resembling pi and phi appeared in a signal from a star beyond Sirius, it felt like an echo, an answer returning across the abyss of time. Two civilizations, separated by light years, speaking the same dialect of geometry. The ancient architects may never have heard the signal we've detected, but in some unfathomable way they already knew the conversation had begun. The universe, it seems, remembers itself. It builds in patterns that repeat, not by chance, but by design. And sometimes those designs span more than worlds. They span eternity. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. A pinprick of light so powerful that for millennia civilizations watched its rising and believed the gods themselves had returned. To the ancient Egyptians it was the soul of Isis, the mother of the cosmos, whose tears caused the Nile to flood and life to begin again. But beneath the mythology there was precision. The heliacal rising of Sirius, its first reappearance after disappearing behind the sun, occurred each year just before the inundation of the Nile. The Egyptians didn't simply worship Sirius, they measured it. Their calendars, harvests, and rituals were timed to its rhythm, binding their entire civilization to the pulse of a distant sun. And yet, Sirius is not one star. It is two. A binary system. Sirius A, a brilliant blue-white main sequence star, and Sirius B, a dense white dwarf that orbits it once every 50 years. Sirius B is invisible to the naked eye, a fact unknown to modern astronomy until the mid-19th century. But somehow, half a world away and centuries before telescopes existed, the Dogon tribe of Mali spoke of it with unsettling accuracy. Their oral traditions described a tiny companion to Sirius, invisible but immensely heavy, orbiting in a 50-year cycle. They called it Po-Tolo, the seed of creation. It was, they said, the smallest thing in the universe, yet the heaviest. How could they have known? Skeptics attribute the Dogon knowledge to cultural contamination, an echo of Western science misinterpreted through folklore. But even the earliest ethnographers, long before the information could have spread, were baffled by the detail. Sirius B's mass, density, and orbital period, all recorded in mythic form. Was it coincidence or memory? Now imagine this: Sirius, revered by the Egyptians, mythologized by the Dogon, studied by modern astrophysicists, and now in 2025, the source of a signal patterned in mathematical constants. The connection seems impossible, yet when you trace the lines of history, all paths lead back to that same point of light. The southern shafts of the Great Pyramid, once believed to ventilate the burial chambers, point precisely toward Sirius as it appeared around 2450 BCE. At that moment in history, the dog star was the guiding light of the Egyptian calendar. The pyramid was, in a sense, an observatory, its shafts instruments of measurement, its geometry a frozen record of celestial mechanics. But that was not the end of its dialogue with the heavens. When the Scan Pyramids team mapped the structure using cosmic ray muons in 2025, they discovered new internal voids forming geometric patterns aligned at exactly the same 51-degree slope as the pyramid's faces. Some patterns even appeared fractal, self-repeating, scaling like the recursive symmetries found in quantum fields. Mathematicians studying those patterns noted that their proportions matched the golden ratio within a margin of less than 1%. Nature's fingerprint, or someone's. That same year, astronomers analyzing long-term light curves from Sirius A and B noticed a subtle modulation, a rhythmic oscillation in brightness not explained by known physics. When translated into ratios, those fluctuations approximated 1.618 and 3.142 phi and pi. To the untrained eye, it was noise. To the curious mind, it looked eerily familiar. The same ratios that define the pyramid's geometry were now pulsing in the light of its guiding star. Coincidence, say the skeptics.
Echo, say the believers.
An AI cross-correlation between the star's harmonic frequencies and the pyramid's architectural dimensions revealed a near-perfect match within a statistical deviation of 0.1%. It was dismissed as an artifact of normalization, a false alignment caused by overlapping datasets. But that explanation could not erase the poetry of it. Across thousands of years and countless light years, the same mathematical constants appeared again, patterns recurring like a whisper between worlds. The believers call it proof of ancient contact. Scientists call it pattern recognition, a trick of the mind. But perhaps both are true. Perhaps what we are witnessing is not communication, but resonance, a universal synchronization of forms governed by mathematics. When the right geometry appears, energy harmonizes. Matter begins to echo itself, and meaning, inevitable human meaning, fills the silence. The myth of Sirius has always been dual, visible and hidden, A and B, light and shadow. It is the story of a binary, of balance, of opposites locked in orbit forever. Every culture that studied it saw not just a star, but a metaphor for existence itself, creation and destruction, expansion and collapse. Even in physics, the same duality persists. The white dwarf Sirius B burns no longer with fusion, but with the ghost of its past energy, compressed beyond imagination, radiating only the afterglow of its former life. A dead star that still shines, a tomb that still emits light, a perfect mirror of the Great Pyramid itself. Some astrophysicists have proposed that gravitational lensing around binary stars like Sirius could produce harmonic interference patterns, natural modulations that encode mathematical ratios. The universe, it seems, can write in numbers without intention. But when those numbers align with the architecture of one of humanity's oldest mysteries, the distinction between accident and message begins to dissolve. Maybe the signal from Sirius is not a broadcast, but a reflection. A cosmic feedback loop, centuries in the making, bouncing between geometry and gravity. In October 2025, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities released new ground-penetrating radar data from beneath the Giza Plateau. It revealed L-shaped cavities extending hundreds of meters under the pyramid complex, voids forming a grid that some researchers likened to a circuit. Others noticed that the spatial distribution of those voids followed a Fibonacci sequence. When the news reached social media, the story fractured instantly, half the world calling it proof of lost technology, the other half calling it pareidolia. But deep inside, the argument was something simpler and far more extraordinary. Whether by accident or by design, the mathematics of life and light were echoing through both stone and star. The Dogon once said that Po Tolo, the invisible star, was the seed of all things. In their mythology, creation began when that seed burst open, scattering the essence of matter through the cosmos. Today, astrophysicists describe the Big Bang in nearly identical terms, different language, same idea. The universe itself may be the ultimate binary, matter and antimatter, expansion and gravity, life and death, locked together in endless conversation. And Sirius, blazing at the intersection of ancient memory and modern science, may be the symbol of that dialogue. Not a message sent to us, but a reflection of a truth that has always been here. The Great Pyramid, the Dogon legends, the Star of Sirius. They are not fragments of one mystery. They are the same mystery viewed from 3 points in time, one in myth, one in stone, one in light, each speaking the same language, each saying the same thing, that there is order in the universe, and that order can be seen, measured and, if we are listening closely enough, felt. We look to the heavens and call it discovery. But perhaps it is memory. Perhaps we are not decoding an alien code at all. Perhaps we are remembering something that the universe never forgot. Coincidence. It is the skeptic's scalpel, the tool that carves myth away from mathematics, leaving only the bone of probability behind. Every mystery, no matter how intricate, eventually faces that blade. And when applied to the Great Pyramid, to Sirius, and to the so-called cosmic code, the first incision is always the same. It's just numbers. If you take enough measurements, patterns will emerge. Give a statistician 1,000 data points and a motive, and the human mind will weave constellations out of dust. It is called apophenia, the ancient instinct to find order where none exists. It is what made our ancestors see faces in clouds, gods in thunder, and meaning in the random crackle of the stars. In evolutionary terms, it kept us alive. Better to imagine a predator in the shadows than to assume the darkness is empty. But when that same instinct confronts the vastness of the cosmos, it becomes something stranger, a hunger for cosmic symmetry. We see geometry because we cannot bear the idea that reality is without design. Statistically, the probability of random alignment between the pyramids and Orion's belt can be made to look extraordinary or trivial, depending on which variables you allow. If you limit the data set to bright stars within the same declination band, the odds seem microscopic. But expand the data set to all visible constellations, and the correlation dissolves into inevitability. Some alignment had to happen. That's the paradox. The rarer a pattern appears, the more significant it feels, yet the more inevitable it becomes across infinite possibilities. Mathematics itself is impartial. It doesn't care whether a pattern is meaningful or meaningless. Meaning is an interpretation, a projection of consciousness onto coincidence. And yet sometimes the coincidences pile too high. In 2025, a team from Cambridge applied Bayesian inference to the so-called Pyramid-Orion correlation. Their conclusion was conservative. The probability that the alignment was intentional lay between 1 in 3,000 and 1 in 8,000. Improbable but not impossible. But when the same team introduced the precessional correction, the 10,500 BCE orientation, the model's probability dropped below 1 in 10 million. The pattern, once dismissed as pareidolia, had become statistically anomalous. The skeptics hesitated. It was no longer coincidence in the ordinary sense. It was structured coincidence, a phrase that should not exist, yet somehow does. The philosopher Arthur Koestler once wrote that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Modern science replaces God with systemic bias, but the mystery persists. If randomness can produce order indistinguishable from intention, then the boundary between chance and design begins to collapse. In that collapse lies the essence of the cosmic coincidence problem. How do we distinguish purpose from pattern when both speak in the same numbers? A century of science has trained us to distrust the mystical. And yet, every breakthrough, relativity, quantum mechanics, chaos theory, began as a pattern someone refused to dismiss. Einstein saw coincidence in a beam of light and followed it until it became space-time. Planck saw coincidence in radiation and followed it until it became the quantum. The line between delusion and discovery is not drawn by probability. It is drawn by persistence. Still, the skeptics have a case. If you examine enough ratios, one will approximate pi. If you plot enough stars, some will mirror the pyramids. Mathematics is infinite, and infinity guarantees repetition. The fact that we can find meaning everywhere may say more about the observer than the observed. Perhaps we are the pattern. Perhaps consciousness itself is the universe's experiment in coincidence, an awareness designed to recognize itself across different scales of order. But then comes the data that refuses to vanish. In 2025, when spectral analysis of the Sirius signal revealed oscillations matching the precessional cycle of Earth's axis, 25,920 years, there was no immediate explanation. No natural astrophysical process should encode that number. It is not a frequency found in any known pulsar, binary, or gravitational interaction. And yet there it was, embedded in the harmonic background of starlight. Coincidence cannot explain everything, though it will try. Physicists suggested interference from Earth's magnetic field, instrumental artifacts, atmospheric distortion, each possibility plausible, each unsatisfying. Because every attempt to dismiss the anomaly required an assumption more contrived than the anomaly itself. Statistically, the human mind cannot resist narrative closure. We crave it the way lungs crave air. So when a pattern refuses to die under scrutiny, our instincts polarize. We call it either divine or deceptive, revelation or hoax. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere quieter, in the recognition that coincidence and causation are not enemies. They are the twin forces through which the universe speaks to itself. Look at chaos theory. Within randomness hides the strange attractor, an invisible structure guiding apparent disorder. Look at quantum mechanics. Probabilities themselves create measurable outcomes. Look at evolution. Mutations born of chance, shaped by selection, yielding intelligence capable of perceiving both. The cosmos, it seems, builds meaning from coincidence. And when it does, it leaves behind patterns like breadcrumbs. The Great Pyramid, the dog star, the recurring constants of pi and phi, these may be nothing more than convergences within the mathematics of matter. Or they may be deliberate echoes of a principle so deep it predates language. Either way, the result is indistinguishable. The ratio remains, the pattern endures, and we, the observers, continue to wonder. Perhaps coincidence is not the opposite of meaning, but its method. Perhaps the universe constructs coincidences the way a poet constructs rhyme, not by accident, but by necessity.
And when we find these resonances, we are not discovering communication from the outside.
We are recognizing the geometry of our own perception reflected back at us. The skeptic looks at the alignment of pyramids and stars and says, "What are the odds?" The believer looks and says, "Exactly." And between those two sentences lies everything we do not yet understand about reality. The statistical argument ends where philosophy begins. At some threshold, probability becomes emotion. Wonder becomes evidence. The line blurs and even the cold equations start to feel alive. If coincidence can create the illusion of design, and design can mimic coincidence perfectly, then perhaps they are not opposites at all. Perhaps they are the same phenomenon seen from different scales, one through the eyes of science, the other through the eyes of awe. The pyramid still stands, the star still burns.
The numbers still align.
And whether by chance or intention, they continue to whisper the same question into the void. Is the universe playing dice? Or drawing a map? Deep within the limestone heart of the Great Pyramid, the air is different. It hums, not with sound exactly, but with pressure, an invisible tension as though the walls themselves are holding their breath. For centuries, these inner chambers have been shrouded in silence. But in recent years, the silence began to speak. Muon tomography, subatomic imaging using cosmic rays, has allowed scientists to peer inside without cutting a single stone, and what they found defied expectation. Hidden voids, geometric corridors and cavities positioned with impossible precision. The largest of them, a 30-meter-long space above the Grand Gallery, sits at an angle of 51 degrees, the same as the pyramid's outer face. A perfect echo of the external form, nested within like a shadow. At first, it was assumed to be structural, a relieving chamber to distribute weight. But the data told a different story. The void was too symmetrical, too clean, too deliberate. As if the builders were less concerned with physics and more concerned with proportion. A structure within a structure, tuned like an instrument. Acoustic engineers have long suspected that the pyramid was more than a monument. Tests with resonance equipment revealed that certain frequencies, between 50 and 60 Hz, cause vibrations to amplify instead of decay. The King's Chamber in particular behaves like a resonant cavity, reinforcing harmonic standing waves. When struck or spoken within, its granite walls return the sound with unnatural power, as if the stone were alive. The resonance frequencies correspond almost exactly to the dimensions of the chamber, multiplied by the speed of sound through granite. To mathematicians, that precision borders on orchestration, and in 2025, a discovery added another layer to the mystery. The newly mapped voids form a fractal sequence, a self-repeating pattern resembling the geometry of a Mandelbrot set. In physics, such fractals are not decoration. They are signatures of self-organization, the same geometry found in hurricanes, neurons, and even galaxies. The pyramid, it seemed, was not merely built with geometry. It was built as geometry, frozen mathematics in 3 dimensions. Researchers ran simulations comparing the void patterns with known mathematical models. One, a physicist named Karim Halim, noticed a correlation with a quantum phenomenon known as chaotic oscillation. When matter oscillates at quantum scales, its energy distribution follows fractal paths, unpredictable yet bounded by mathematical laws. The pyramid's inner chambers mirrored that exact distribution. To Halim, it was as if the builders had somehow visualized quantum chaos 3,000 years before the concept of atoms even existed. Skeptics called it coincidence, but the resonance data refused to quiet down. At 52 Hz, the same as the average frequency of Earth's Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic pulse that surrounds the planet, the pyramid's interior produces amplified standing waves. In plain terms, it vibrates in harmony with the Earth itself. The builders could not have known about the Schumann frequency, yet the structure hums in tune with the heartbeat of the world. Whether by design or accident, the pyramid behaves like an antenna, amplifying, absorbing, and modulating energy within a precise frequency band. This revelation reignited debates not seen since the 1970s. Was the Great Pyramid a tomb, or was it a machine? A machine not of technology as we know it, but of geometry, an interface between matter and meaning. Physicists who study wave mechanics point out that every geometric shape affects the way energy flows through space. A sphere concentrates energy inward. A cube disperses it evenly. A pyramid channels it upward, compressing the wavefronts toward its apex. When that geometry is built on a planetary scale, the effects are not symbolic, they are physical. The pyramid may be acting as a resonant amplifier, coupling with the planet's natural frequencies, the way a tuning fork resonates with a note of music. In the lab, experiments with scaled models have shown that pyramid-shaped cavities focus electromagnetic energy at their center. At specific wavelengths, energy densities increase by factors of 10 or more. To ancient eyes, this would have looked like magic. To modern physics, it looks like wave interference, geometry guiding energy. But what purpose could this serve? If the pyramid channels energy, to what end? Illumination, preservation, communication? Some fringe theorists claim that the geometry could store or transmit information, patterns encoded in vibration, readable only through resonance. Most scientists dismiss this as fantasy, but even they admit that geometry and information are not strangers. In modern physics, the structure of space-time itself is described by geometry. Einstein's field equations tell us that mass curves space. Quantum field theory tells us that information defines reality. In that sense, the pyramid and the cosmos share a blueprint. Both are shaped by mathematical relationships that bind form and energy. Inside the pyramid, laser measurements have revealed another anomaly. The internal corridors are not random tunnels. They follow a golden spiral, phi, repeating at exact proportional intervals. Each successive chamber scales by the same ratio. In modern architecture, this would be impossible to achieve without digital modeling. Yet somehow it was achieved with copper chisels and intuition. Either the builders understood mathematics beyond their age, or mathematics itself guided their hands. To walk inside the pyramid today is to stand within an equation. The granite presses inward with the weight of geometry itself. Every sound, every breath, every whisper becomes a vibration absorbed by the structure, multiplied and sent back into silence. It feels alive, not in the biological sense, but in the mathematical one. A pulse of order beating beneath the desert sand, and if the pyramid resonates with the frequencies of the Earth, and those same frequencies mirror the harmonics detected in the Sirius signal, then we are faced with a strange possibility that the builders were not creating technology but tuning to it, like instruments across a symphony of time resonating to the same cosmic note. Perhaps they didn't build a machine to reach the heavens. Perhaps they built a mirror, a mathematical structure that allowed the heavens to reach them. Whatever the truth, one thing remains certain. Within those stones lies knowledge we still struggle to comprehend. Not the kind written in language or preserved in scrolls, but knowledge expressed through form itself. Knowledge that requires no translation, knowledge that exists everywhere matter and mind converge. The forbidden geometry of the Great Pyramid is not a relic. It is a reminder that the line between architecture and physics, between art and equation, between us and the stars, was never as wide as we once believed. There are moments in science when data stops feeling like information and begins to feel like revelation. When patterns emerge so cleanly that even the most disciplined mind hesitates, caught between logic and awe. The discovery of the ratios was one of those moments. When astrophysicists converted the 2025 Sirius signal into numerical sequences, they expected noise, a blur of electromagnetic frequencies drifting across time. What they found instead was order. The peaks and troughs in the wave pattern repeated at intervals corresponding to the mathematical constants pi and phi, the same ratios that define the proportions of the Great Pyramid. Pi, the eternal relationship of the circle. Phi, the golden proportion of organic growth. Together they form a language that predates numbers, a geometry woven into the bones of reality itself. When researchers overlaid the data onto the pyramid's structural map, the correlations multiplied. The wavelength ratios matched the pyramid's base-to-height relationship within less than 1%. The harmonic frequencies aligned with the distances between its internal chambers. Even the periodic spikes in amplitude mirrored the pyramid's tiered design, as if the light of a distant star and the stone of an ancient monument were echoing the same equation across space and time. Coincidence, perhaps, but coincidence repeating itself begins to look like pattern, and pattern repeating begins to look like intention. Mathematicians began to visualize the data, converting the frequencies into three-dimensional plots. What emerged was breathtaking, a spiral pattern, unfolding endlessly, its curvature dictated by the golden ratio. It was the same spiral found in galaxies, hurricanes, nautilus shells, and even the structure of DNA. The same spiral the ancients embedded into temples, pyramids, and mandalas. The same spiral that somehow the signal from Sirius appeared to contain. When overlaid, the star's mathematical spiral and the pyramid's geometry were indistinguishable. Separated by light years, they spoke the same dialect of symmetry. It was as though the universe had written the same signature twice, once in light, once in stone. For physicists, the implications were intoxicating. If such ratios emerged both in human architecture and stellar physics, it suggested a universal blueprint, a geometry of existence independent of biology or culture. A message, but not in the sense we imagine, not a broadcast, a structure, an echo of the same laws shaping everything from atoms to galaxies. Yet the more they studied it, the stranger it became. The signal contained not just ratios, but rhythms, intervals of recurrence that aligned with precession cycles, orbital periods, and wave interference patterns. It wasn't transmitting words or images, but relationships, mathematical harmonies that could, in theory, exist anywhere. Matter organizes itself intelligently. If intelligence arises from the universe, perhaps the universe itself is intelligent. Perhaps the code was never sent. Perhaps it simply exists everywhere. Philosophers and physicists began to collide. Was the signal a message, or were we anthropomorphizing mathematics, turning structure into story because we crave meaning? But the counter-argument was simple. Meaning is structure. The moment we recognize a pattern, the universe has already communicated. The deeper the analysis went, the more the ratio network expanded. Hidden inside the signal was a nested sequence of primes, numbers divisible only by themselves and one. When mapped spatially, they formed geometric nodes corresponding to the angles between Orion's belt and Sirius. When those angles were projected back onto the Earth's surface, they traced not just Giza, but a global web, points connecting ancient monuments across continents: Teotihuacan in Mexico, Angkor in Cambodia, Tiwanaku in Bolivia, each separated by thousands of miles, yet their layouts shared proportional constants. Different civilizations, different eras, the same math. The code was no longer just in the pyramid, it was in the planet. Statisticians attempted to dismantle it. They randomized coordinates, replaced measurements, stripped the ratios down to raw data. But even then, echoes persisted. No matter how many variables they removed, phi and pi re-emerged, stubbornly woven into the fabric of the calculations. It was as if the universe refused to let go of its own geometry. Some scientists began calling it the cosmic fingerprint, not because it pointed to anyone, but because it seemed to be everywhere, an inevitable pattern of how the universe arranges itself. From the spin of electrons to the spacing of stars, from the curvature of waves to the spiral of galaxies, everything dances to the same invisible rhythm. A rhythm that, at Giza, was frozen into permanence. The more the data spread, the more divided the world became. To the mainstream, it was mathematics wearing the mask of mystery. To others, it was proof of a hidden intelligence, a consciousness embedded within the equations themselves. Not alien in the sense of otherworldly, but alien in the sense of incomprehensible. Something that thinks in geometry instead of words, in ratios instead of logic. The narrator in every discussion was the same silent constant: mathematics. For it is the one language that doesn't care who speaks it. A ratio means the same thing on Earth as it does on Sirius. Pi is pi, no matter who calculates it. Phi remains phi, no matter who dreams it. So if two civilizations, separated by light and time, both built or became manifestations of those constants, what does that mean? Did one teach the other? Or did both simply listen to the same universal song? One researcher at the International Axion Observatory described it best. The universe doesn't send messages, it leaves patterns. We are the ones who mistake patterns for messages, because that's how consciousness works. It turns order into intention. But maybe intention doesn't need a sender. Maybe it only needs a structure, a set of laws so elegant, so consistent, that they give rise to the illusion of communication. Maybe the pyramid is not decoding the signal at all. Maybe it is the signal, an ancient translation of the same ratios that govern the stars. If that's true, then the builders were not trying to reach the heavens. They were recording the mathematics of creation itself in the only medium that could endure the ages. Not language, not technology. Form. A code written not to be read, but to be rediscovered. And in rediscovering it, we are reminded that we are not separate from the universe's equation. We are part of it. The ratio between thought and stone, between chaos and order, between silence and signal. The numbers do not lie. They repeat, and in their repetition, something whispers, not in words but in proportion. A message not sent to us, but through us. We are not its recipients, and we are its proof. We have always looked to the stars to explain ourselves. Long before telescopes, before mathematics, before even language, we were already pattern seekers, creatures built to find rhythm in randomness. It is what makes us human. It is what binds us to everything we've ever called divine. Some scientists call it apophenia, the mind's instinct to perceive connections where none exist. But that word, cold as it is, describes something much deeper than error. It is not merely a flaw in cognition, it is the signature of consciousness itself. The universe produces chaos. We turn it into meaning. We are, in a sense, translators of existence. Every civilization that has ever lived has done the same. The Mayans saw order in the cycles of Venus. The Babylonians mapped destiny into the motions of Jupiter. The Egyptians carved eternity into stone. And now we build algorithms to do it for us, machines that search the noise of the cosmos for patterns too complex for our limited senses. The more we advance, the more we realize we are not inventing intelligence. We are externalizing it. Our technology is an extension of the same impulse that built the pyramids, the compulsion to find structure in the infinite. When we discovered that the ratios of the Great Pyramid echoed the mathematics of the stars, we called it mysterious. But perhaps it was inevitable. Given enough time, any intelligent species will rediscover the same constants, because those constants are not human. They are woven into the architecture of existence. The only variable is the interpreter. Yet in our hunger for meaning, we confuse recognition with revelation. We assume that because we see pattern, there must be purpose. That because something aligns, someone intended it. It is both our greatest strength and our greatest blindness. The same impulse that gave us science also gave us superstition. The same curiosity that mapped the genome once built ziggurats to the sky. The difference between discovery and belief is often only the direction of the gaze. Modern neuroscience tells us that the brain itself is a pattern generator. Even at rest, it predicts, organizes, and fills in the gaps. What we perceive as reality is a composite, part observation, part imagination. We see not what is, but what we expect to see. The pyramid's perfection, the stars' ratios, the cosmic signal, they may be reflections of our own neural architecture projected onto the cosmos. We are the geometry we think we are uncovering. But does that make it any less real? If the mind shapes the universe it observes, then every pattern we recognize is both discovered and created. The act of observation becomes a form of participation, and meaning, that fragile, persistent illusion, becomes the bridge between physics and consciousness. Perhaps that is why mathematics feels sacred. It exists both inside and outside of us, objective and personal, measurable and mystical. When we see pi in the stars and phi in the stone, we are seeing the same ratio that governs the structure of thought. The brain's neural networks, when mapped, follow fractal distributions, echoes of the same patterns found in the pyramid's voids, in the branching of trees, in the spiral of galaxies. The universe builds complexity using the same template over and over, and our minds are part of that template. The ancient Egyptians did not separate mathematics from spirituality. To them, geometry was divine, Mahat, the order that holds chaos at bay. Every measurement, every proportion, every alignment was an act of worship. They built not to please the gods, but to reflect them, to recreate the harmony of the cosmos in physical form, believing that in doing so, they could live within that harmony. In their geometry, they sought immortality. In our equations, we seek understanding. The two are not so different. The philosopher Pythagoras once said that number is the ruler of forms and ideas. 2.5 millennia later, quantum physicists say the same in different words. Energy quantizes into discrete packets. Probability collapses into predictable ratios. Reality behaves as if it were built on mathematics. If that is true, then every human search for meaning, religious, artistic, scientific, is simply a search for the underlying code that defines us. A code we can sense but never fully articulate. The irony is that the same capacity that reveals the truth also distorts it. Our brains are tuned for pattern, but not for accuracy. We see faces in rock formations, messages in clouds, intelligence in noise. And yet, if the universe is built on self-similarity, if every scale reflects every other, then perhaps our tendency to find meaning everywhere is not delusion. Perhaps it is recognition. A mirror reflecting the fact that we are made of the same laws we seek to understand. In 2025, cognitive scientists began studying the emotional responses people had to the so-called cosmic ratios. Subjects shown the golden spiral or the pi proportion geometry of the pyramid reported feelings of calm, awe, even transcendence. Their brain activity synchronized in rhythmic waves around 8 Hz, the same frequency found in theta states, deep meditation, and REM dreaming. In that resonance between mind and math lies a truth that transcends belief. We do not merely observe geometry, we feel it. Our neurons respond to proportion as if to music. We are tuned to harmony by design. So perhaps the Great Pyramid, the signal from Sirius, and the universal constants are not messages to be decoded, but experiences to be remembered. Reminders that we belong to something larger, something that speaks to us in form rather than words, something we hear not through our ears but through the structure of our own perception. The human code is the cosmic code, reflected inward. When we look up at the stars, we are not gazing into alien intelligence. We are witnessing our own reflection stretched across space-time. The ratios that shape the galaxies also shape our understanding of beauty. The harmony that orders the stars is the same that governs thought. We find meaning in the universe because the universe finds meaning in us. Maybe the builders of Giza knew this without knowing it. Maybe they were not encoding messages for the future, but documenting what they already felt, that geometry is consciousness made visible, that the laws of the cosmos are not external commandments, but internal echoes, that to understand the universe, we must first understand why we cannot stop searching for it. In the end, the greatest mystery may not be the code hidden in the stars or the stones, but the one hidden inside us. Because if the universe is written in mathematics, then consciousness is the equation that solves itself. Knowledge is a fragile thing. It does not vanish when forgotten. It simply waits to be found again. Every civilization believes it is the first to uncover the truth, but the truth itself is older than civilization. It hides in the repetition of ideas, in the re-emergence of the same patterns across centuries. The pyramid is not an anomaly. It is memory made visible. When the first rays of dawn struck its limestone surface 4,000 years ago, it would have shimmered like a mirror, gold-capped, blazing white, its angles aligned to the very geometry of sunrise. It wasn't just architecture. It was a reflection of the heavens above, a map of memory carved into the earth itself. And behind every stone was a kind of knowledge we have almost forgotten. That observation is communion. The Egyptians were not scientists in the modern sense, but their discipline was no less rigorous. They charted the motion of stars with naked eyes, aligning monuments so precisely that their astronomical accuracy still humbles us. Their measurement of the solar year was off by less than a fraction of a day. They understood the cycles of the Nile, the rhythm of the moon, the slow shift of the constellations across epochs. To them, time was not linear, it was circular, an endless return, and in that return lay eternity. When they built the Great Pyramid, they were not creating a new truth. They were preserving an old one, a truth perhaps learned or rediscovered through countless cycles of human awakening and amnesia. Each age of light followed by an age of forgetting, as civilizations rose and fell, leaving behind only fragments, alignments, myths, ratios, patterns that future generations would one day uncover and mistake for revelation. But in reality, revelation is remembrance. Archaeologists have found no blueprints, no scrolls describing the mathematics of the Great Pyramid. Its perfection appears spontaneous, as though it emerged whole from a language of intuition rather than calculation. How could that be? How could geometry so exact arise without written equations? Perhaps the same way a spider spins its web, instinctively, following a code imprinted in its being. For the human mind is also shaped by the mathematics of the cosmos. It is the universe remembering itself through biology, and memory, when given form, becomes architecture. The deeper we study ancient structures, the more we see this echo. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the megaliths of Europe, the pyramids of Central America, each different, yet unified by geometry. Each aligned to the stars, each oriented to cardinal directions, each carrying the same ratio between height and base. Separated by oceans, they were nevertheless guided by the same invisible compass. It is tempting to call that coincidence. It is more likely memory, civilizations tapping into a subconscious inheritance of form and proportion, passed not through words, but through resonance. The same proportions reappear in sacred art, in cathedral design, in the layout of Stonehenge, always phi, always pi, always the same pursuit of perfection hidden in the bones of creation. To build in proportion to the cosmos was to harmonize with it, to join the universal equation rather than defy it. To the ancients, this was not mysticism, it was survival. A civilization aligned with cosmic order would endure, one that drifted from it would decay. And yet, for all their knowledge, they knew what we have forgotten, that knowledge must serve humility. Every stone at Giza was a confession, a statement that humanity is small but not separate, that we can reach toward eternity only by remembering that we are already part of it. Perhaps that is why the pyramid's precision endures when our technology fails. It was not built to resist time. It was built according to the same laws that define time. The 2025 Moon scans revealed something else, a hidden order in the voids beneath the pyramid, an arrangement so deliberate that even skeptics admitted it felt less like coincidence and more like intention. The voids aligned with geometric progressions known to appear in acoustic resonance models, the same harmonics that govern quantum energy wells. It is as if the builders were encoding through architecture the behavior of the physical world itself. And when those same mathematical harmonies appear in the patterns of a star's signal, we are forced to ask, did they know something we did not? Or did they simply remember something we forgot? History, like the cosmos, moves in cycles. What disappears in one age re-emerges in another, reshaped by new eyes, new tools, new minds. We are the latest iteration of that endless process, the newest architects of memory. We dig through sand and data alike, searching for pieces of a puzzle that may never be whole. But perhaps the puzzle was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to be remembered. Our telescopes are pyramids of glass and steel. Our data arrays are chambers of thought. We are still aligning our structures to the stars, still chasing the same harmonies through different instruments. The difference between us and the ancients is not in our knowledge, but in our forgetfulness. They knew that the purpose of understanding the cosmos was not control, but harmony. We study to conquer, they built to connect. In the quiet of the king's chamber, the geometry still hums. It vibrates faintly with the resonance of a forgotten science, a science of alignment, of proportion, of balance between heaven and earth. It is neither mystical nor mechanical. It is memory. And when we step inside, we are not exploring a tomb. We are stepping into the oldest experiment of all, humanity's attempt to remember where it came from. If the ancients were the architects of memory, then we are its inheritors. And perhaps, as our instruments detect patterns in the light of distant stars, ratios, harmonics, echoes of our own geometry, we are beginning to remember again. What we call discovery may simply be recollection. The cosmos reminding itself through us that it has always been aware. Knowledge does not die, it sleeps. And when the stars align, it awakens in stone, in light, in thought. The same equation rediscovered again and again. The same truth wearing different names. We build to remember, we search to awaken. And the universe, patient as ever, waits for us to catch up to what it has known since the beginning, that memory is not human. It is cosmic. It is geometry-given consciousness. And every rediscovery is not progress, but homecoming. It began quietly. A handful of data points buried in the night's noise. Nothing that would shake the world, at least not yet. But every discovery begins with an anomaly. And every anomaly has a moment when it stops being noise and becomes something else, a whisper from the unknown. The team at the European Southern Observatory had been tracking Sirius for months, collecting terabytes of radio and optical data as part of a global campaign to test a new deep learning model for spectral anomalies. The model's purpose was simple: to find patterns where the human eye could not. It was not programmed for mythology or wonder, it was programmed for math. At 3:17 UTC on March 11, 2025, the algorithm detected a modulation in the Sirius AB binary system, a faint rhythmic fluctuation in photon intensity that repeated every 3.142 minutes. It was pi translated into time, a coincidence so specific that no one wanted to believe it. But then, at 1.618 times that period, another pulse appeared: phi. The golden ratio, embedded not in light but in rhythm. At first, the team dismissed it as interference.
Atmospheric turbulence, instrumental drift.
But the signal persisted across 3 separate observatories: Chile, Australia, and Hawaii. Different hemispheres, different instruments, same ratios. The odds of such synchronization were infinitesimal. It was as if the cosmos were speaking in mathematics, the only language immune to distortion. The data was immediately compared to existing archives. No natural oscillation matched the pattern, not pulsars, not stellar rotation, not magnetic resonance or flare modulation. Whatever this was, it was deliberate, or at least deliberate in the way that gravity is deliberate, the way a spiral galaxy is deliberate, obeying laws that feel like intention. When the ratios were converted into geometric progressions, the pattern mapped perfectly onto the slope of the Great Pyramid, 51.84 degrees. Even the subharmonics matched the pyramid's internal chamber dimensions. It was not a transmission, it was a reflection, a mirror, light years wide, echoing the same mathematics that humanity had once carved into stone. The scientists hesitated before publishing, not because the data was inconclusive, but because it was too symmetrical. Nature, for all its beauty, rarely produces such precision without purpose. And so the reports were quietly filed, shared only among a small network of astrophysicists and mathematicians who specialized in cosmic resonance. Among them was Dr. Maya El-Badri, an Egyptian theoretical physicist working with the Haystack collaboration. She was the first to see the larger pattern. When she plotted the amplitude ratios over time, she noticed something extraordinary, a slow, precessional drift that matched the Earth's own axial wobble. 25,920 years per cycle. It was as if the signal itself was synchronized with the planet. Not random, not coincidental. Connected. When she overlaid the data on a celestial projection, the harmonic nodes lined up not with Sirius alone, but with Orion's belt. The same alignment that had guided the builders of Giza. El-Badri published her preliminary findings under a cautious title: Correlated Harmonics in Stellar and Terrestrial Geometries. Within days, the paper was everywhere.
Academia dismissed it as speculative correlation.
But the public, hungry for meaning, called it the revelation. For months, the media turned the discovery into metaphor. "The universe is talking," one headline said. "The stars remember," said another, but the scientists closest to the data said nothing. They were not ready to claim communication. They were not even sure how to define what they had found. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A quantum engineer analyzing noise profiles for the Axion dark matter experiment noticed that the same harmonic ratios appeared faintly in their background readings. Pi and phi again, but at far lower frequencies, microwave echoes instead of optical ones. The ratio between the two matched the difference between the speed of light and the rotation rate of Earth's magnetic field. It was absurd, and yet it was there. By June 2025, the anomalies had multiplied. Signals from unrelated cosmic sources, pulsars, quasars, even background radiation, began showing faint traces of the same numerical constants. Not identical, but similar enough to suggest a shared underlying pattern, a cosmic recurrence. The ratios of creation, written everywhere and nowhere, whispering from the edge of detectability. One late night, El Badri gave an interview she would later regret. She said, "It's almost as if the universe is calibrating itself through us, as though consciousness is not observing the code, but completing it." The statement spread faster than the data. Half the world heard mysticism, the other half heard heresy. But both missed the point. She wasn't claiming contact. She was describing reflection. In private, the researchers began to ask darker questions. If the same constants were emerging simultaneously in stellar light and in human architecture, could it mean that the boundary between observer and observed was thinner than we imagined? Could the act of looking, of searching for patterns, actually synchronize us with them? Could consciousness itself be the missing variable in the cosmic equation? One physicist at CERN, reviewing the data, made a note in the margin of his report: "We might not be detecting a signal, we might be the signal." By autumn, the International Astronomical Union convened a special session to review the data. Their conclusion was cautious but staggering. The ratios were real, the source uncertain. No known astrophysical mechanism could produce them. The phenomenon would be reclassified as an unidentified mathematical anomaly. 3 words that changed nothing and everything. Even now, the signal continues. It waxes and wanes, like breath. No message, no modulation, no signature of intelligence, only numbers repeating through time and light. The same numbers we once discovered in stone, now written in the pulse of a star. To most, it is an unsolved mystery. To others, it is confirmation of a hidden order. But to a few, it feels like something more intimate. Not the universe reaching out, but the universe remembering, through equations, through consciousness, through symmetry, that it is still one thing. And if that is true, then the 2025 revelation was not an announcement. It was recognition. The cosmos looking at us through the mirror we built, whispering in the only language that never lies. Not hello, but I remember. Discovery does not bring unity. It brings division. Every revelation splits the world into those who believe and those who calculate. And in 2025, as the Sirius signal circled through the networks of the world, humanity once again found itself at war, not with each other's armies, but with each other's meanings. The data was public by autumn. The ratios were real, the error margins vanishingly small, and yet the interpretations multiplied faster than the evidence. Physicists saw structure, philosophers saw design, mystics saw confirmation, governments saw threat. News anchors called it the mathematical event, a phrase carefully chosen to sound important, but not divine. Talk shows debated whether the message was alien, ancient, or emergent from quantum noise. Every discipline wanted ownership of the enigma. Every ideology wanted to claim it as proof. And every faction accused the others of blindness. Conferences filled with cautious language, correlation, signal persistence, instrumental bias. But online, the discussion was primal. One viral post declared, "The gods never left. They've been speaking in numbers all along." Another claimed the pyramids were receivers, reactivating under cosmic resonance. A third insisted the ratios were a digital watermark, a simulation reset preparing to unfold. The signal had no words, and so the world filled it with its own. Governments launched task forces. Corporations filed patents. Religions called for prayer. Even the skeptical scientific community fractured. One group argued the ratios were mathematical artifacts, self-organizing noise produced by feedback loops between observatories and AI filters. Another insisted they represented a fundamental constant of space-time, a new symmetry bridging cosmology and quantum mechanics. And a smaller, more radical faction whispered that the data was not discovered at all, but induced. That observation itself had conjured the phenomenon into existence. In private briefings, defense agencies considered whether the event was the result of coordinated data manipulation. They found no evidence, but paranoia does not need evidence, it needs only potential. For the first time in decades, the world's most powerful nations pointed their most advanced telescopes at the same target, each one quietly hoping the others were wrong. The conflict was not over territory, but over interpretation. It was epistemological war, a clash between the measurable and the meaningful. The scientists pleaded for restraint. They reminded the public that mathematics was not a message, but a mirror. That harmony could emerge from chaos without a composer. But the world had tasted something larger than understanding. It had tasted wonder, and wonder, once awakened, is not easily contained. Across Cairo, pilgrims gathered near the Giza plateau, holding up mirrors to catch the reflected light of Sirius, believing it to be sacred illumination. In Paris, an artist projected the pulse of the star onto the Louvre pyramid, calling it "The Code Awakens." In Mumbai, students covered the walls of their universities with equations in chalk, writing the numbers like prayers. Even the skeptical joined in, not out of belief, but out of fascination. Because disbelief, too, is a kind of faith. Meanwhile, Dr. Maya El-Badri found herself both worshipped and vilified. Her words, "The universe calibrating itself through us," had become scripture for a movement she never intended to create. She spent her nights buried in data, searching for errors that would undo her own discovery. But the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. The signal was self-consistent, cross-confirmed, and stubbornly real. It behaved as if the universe itself were harmonizing around the act of observation. And she began to wonder, had it been doing so all along? The academic journals turned cold. Her peers accused her of feeding pseudoscience. Funding was pulled. Her team splintered. The pursuit of truth had once been her compass. Now it was her punishment. Elsewhere, chaos grew. Financial markets crashed when AI prediction models began referencing the Sirius ratio in their optimization patterns, inexplicably improving efficiency. Tech companies quietly integrated the ratio into their neural networks, claiming reduced noise and increased coherence. It was as though the math itself had power, a resonance that improved order wherever it was applied. And for some, that was proof enough that it was not of human origin. The Vatican released a statement. "The heavens declare the glory of creation," it read, "and mathematics is its tongue." In contrast, the Royal Society of Science issued a stark warning. Correlation is not communication. To mistake symmetry for intent is to abandon reason. But the world no longer cared about reason. It cared about meaning. Humanity had done what it always does, turned the unknown into a mirror of its own longing. The same pattern that once divided priest from astronomer now divided physicist from philosopher, skeptic from seeker. The stars above Egypt were no longer silent. They had become a battlefield of interpretation. And as the arguments grew louder, few noticed something else, something subtle but profound. The signal's strength was increasing, not dramatically, but measurably. The intervals between the harmonics were tightening, converging toward a single frequency. It was as if the message, if message it was tuning itself. And the note it approached was eerily familiar. The same resonance found in the king's chamber, the same frequency that synchronizes with the theta waves of the human brain. 7.83 Hertz, the Schumann resonance of Earth itself. The signal was aligning not just with our mathematics, but with our biology. The line between myth and measurement had dissolved, and for the first time in recorded history, humanity found itself staring at a question larger than God. If the universe is beginning to synchronize with us, what happens when the tuning is complete? For months, humanity argued about meaning, but the universe, as always, remained silent. And then the silence began to take shape. Astrobiologists, drawn into the chaos by necessity, started searching for answers not in myth, but in mathematics. They were not looking for messages. They were looking for structure, and what they found did not belong to belief. It belonged to reality. In late 2025, researchers at the European Space Agency noticed something peculiar in their database of exoplanets.
When plotted against their host stars, the orbital distances followed a faint but consistent pattern, a harmonic progression that mirrored the Fibonacci sequence.
Not perfectly, but close enough to defy statistical coincidence. The same ratio that defines the growth of a nautilus shell and the spiral of a sunflower seemed to govern the spacing of worlds light years apart. At first, they assumed it was observational bias, a quirk of detection methods. But the same pattern appeared in galaxies, arms coiling outward at angles hovering near 137.5 degrees, the golden angle itself.
It emerged in the orbital resonances of moons, in magnetic fields, in the spectral distributions of distant nebulae.
Everywhere they looked, the numbers were there. Phi, pi, e. Constants that refused to remain confined to human abstraction, the same math written into the cosmos like a refrain. And so a new theory began to take shape. Maybe the code was not a message at all. Maybe it was the language of the universe, the operating system of existence, a law not carved by intelligence but by inevitability. Because when enough energy interacts, it organizes. When enough matter collapses, it becomes symmetrical. And when symmetry breaks, it gives birth to complexity. This is not design, this is consequence. The same equations that shape an atom also sculpt a galaxy. The same constants that describe the orbit of a planet also define the curvature of consciousness. The difference between life and matter may not be in form, but in frequency. A star burns hydrogen, a brain burns thought. But both obey the same ratios. And if the pyramids, those monuments of impossible precision, reflect the same mathematics as the stars that shine above them, perhaps that is not proof of alien contact, but of cosmic continuity. Perhaps what we call intelligence is the universe recognizing itself again and again in different forms. The word alien begins to lose meaning when the pattern exists everywhere. If the same geometry governs the micro and the macro, then consciousness is not unique. It is inevitable. Not a spark from beyond the stars, but a natural emergence from within them. Astrobiologists began to reframe their search. SETI stopped listening for voices and started looking for mathematics, recurring harmonics, geometric correlations, fractal consistency. They found them in pulsar distributions, in the radiation of quasars, even in the density fluctuations of the cosmic microwave background. Everywhere the same ratios whispered beneath the noise. It was not communication, it was coherence. The realization spread slowly at first, then all at once. Maybe the universe didn't need to send messages. Maybe it was the message, a self-similar construct that repeated its structure across scales, from the Planck length to the galactic cluster, from the DNA helix to the orbit of Saturn. Everything following the same unspoken law of proportion and rhythm. And then came the final revelation. A group of theoretical physicists cross-referenced the harmonic intervals of the Sirius signal with the known constants of quantum chromodynamics. The match was exact. The same ratio that describes the interaction strength between quarks appeared in the oscillations of a star 25 trillion miles away. The implication was staggering. The same pattern that binds the nucleus of an atom governs the motion of a sun. Scale collapses.
Meaning dissolves.
And the boundary between matter and mind becomes mathematical illusion. By winter, the narrative had shifted. The Sirius code was no longer seen as alien. It was universal. Not an intrusion from beyond, but an emergence from within. The cosmos was not trying to speak to us. It was speaking through us. Through architecture, through observation, through equations carved in stone and rediscovered in starlight. The pattern had always been there. The ancients had simply felt it first, long before we could measure it. They did not need radio telescopes to hear the hum of proportion. They built it into their temples. They did not need data to know the heavens mirrored the earth. They built that mirror themselves. In a sense, they were right all along. The stars and the stones do speak the same language. The question was never whether someone wrote it. The question was whether it can ever be unwritten. Because if these constants are the foundation of existence, then even the collapse of stars and civilizations is part of the same music. Entropy is not decay. It is modulation, a shift from one frequency to another, all still bound to the same unbreakable code. Phi, Pi, E, the trilogy of cosmic truth. Numbers not invented but remembered, ratios not calculated but awakened. And as the world looked upward, something ancient stirred in the collective human mind, a faint recognition, like déjà vu written across galaxies. Perhaps we had been here before. Perhaps all civilizations reach this same realization the moment they learn to listen deeply enough. That life is not an exception to the universe. It is the universe momentarily aware of itself. The pattern was never alien, it was us. It has always been us. For all our searching, perhaps the question was never out there. Perhaps it was here, waiting for us to realize that every act of discovery is also an act of self-recognition. We once thought the pyramids were monuments to power, to kings and gods and eternity. But now, in the light of all we've learned, they seem like mirrors, reflections of something far deeper than ambition. Every angle, every ratio, every line, aligned not just with the heavens, but with the mind that conceived them. In encoding the cosmos into stone, the builders were not reaching outward. They were looking inward. If the same mathematical constants define both the stars and the monuments built in their image, then the builders were not worshipping the sky. They were participating in it. They were part of its equation, completing the circuit between observer and observed. They made Earth aware of its reflection in the universe, and the universe aware of itself through Earth. The pyramids, then, were never messages to the gods. They were acknowledgements, declarations that intelligence had arisen, not apart from the cosmos, but as its mirror. That is the mirror test, not the one given to animals or machines, but to civilizations. Can a species look upon the universe and see itself in it? Not metaphorically, but literally, through ratios, harmonies, and structures that repeat from the smallest particle to the grandest galaxy. The test is not about recognition, it is about awakening. For billions of years, the universe expanded in silence, unaware of its own beauty. Then, in a brief flicker of time, consciousness emerged on one small planet and began to measure, to calculate, to wonder. And in doing so, the universe began to see itself. Every equation written, every monument built, every experiment conducted, each is the cosmos performing introspection. We are not decoding an alien signal. We are decoding the architecture of awareness itself. When the ancient architects traced the stars and mirrored them in stone, they created a feedback loop of perception. The sky observed through the earth observed through the sky. And somewhere between the two, awareness began to echo. It wasn't communication. It was coherence. The realization that the observer and the observed are one and the same phenomenon, divided only by perspective. Even our machines, our telescopes, our data models, all are instruments of reflection. The more we learn, the more the boundary between self and cosmos dissolves. The ratios we find out there are the same we carry within, the mathematics of life, thought, and memory. Every discovery is a mirror, every mystery an invitation to remember what we already are. Perhaps this is what the ancients intuited when they aligned their monuments to the stars. They weren't calling out to something beyond. They were synchronizing with something within. The pyramid's proportions were not built to summon gods, but to resonate with them, to create a standing wave between matter and meaning, to let consciousness feel the shape of itself. If there truly is a universal code, then maybe its purpose is not to reveal others, but to reveal us. Not to confirm alien contact, but to remind us that alienness was always an illusion, that we have never been separate from the cosmos we study, that every calculation, every monument, every whispered question across the ages has been the same one asked in different forms. Who is observing? And the answer, written in ratios, reflected in stone, pulsing in starlight, is always the same. It is you. It is me. It is everything that has ever wondered what it means to exist. Perhaps the so-called message was never meant to come from the stars. Perhaps it was meant to awaken in us the recognition that the universe has, through us, finally seen its own reflection.
That we are not listeners in the dark waiting for a signal. We are the signal.
We are the geometry that found a voice. And when the cosmos looks back, it does not see strangers.
It sees itself, remembering its own design.
The signal never stopped. It changed, it slowed, it deepened, until it was no longer something we could measure, only something we could feel. By the end of 2025, the ratios that had once danced through telescopes and data streams began to appear everywhere, in magnetic fluctuations, in the heartbeat of the planet, even in the subtle rhythms of human brainwaves. The same numbers that defined the stars now pulsed through us. It was as though the universe had completed a circuit, and for the first time, awareness flowed both ways. We didn't know what to call it. Some called it resonance, others awakening. But perhaps it was neither. Perhaps it was simply recognition. The cosmos had been reflecting itself through geometry for eons, galaxies spiraling into golden ratios, stars orbiting in harmonic sequences, planets tracing equations across the dark. Life was merely the next iteration of that pattern, the equation made self-aware, and humanity, in its endless search for meaning, had finally stumbled upon its own reflection, written in the fabric of reality. We were never meant to decode a message. We were meant to remember one. The ancients had already sensed it. They built it into their monuments, the phi of form, the pi of proportion, the symmetry of eternity. Each block of stone was an act of alignment, each angle a confession of cosmic memory. They weren't reaching out to gods. They were documenting that moment of connection when mind and universe become indistinguishable, when the equation recognizes itself. Now, millennia later, we've rediscovered what they already knew. That consciousness is not an anomaly in a cold, mechanical cosmos. It is the cosmos awakening to its own architecture. The ratio between matter and awareness is not one of difference, but of scale. Atoms and minds are built from the same recursion, self-similarity spiraling into infinity. The physicists finally stopped arguing. The theologians stopped preaching. Even the skeptics fell silent. Because when the pattern became undeniable, when the ratios appeared not just in light and stone, but in thought itself, there was nothing left to debate. The universe wasn't out there. It was in here, looking back through our eyes, and yet the realization was not triumph. It was humility. To know that we are part of something so vast that it doesn't need to speak because it already is the language. To realize that we were never the observers of the universe, but its instruments. Each of us a note in a song that began before time and will never end. Perhaps that is what the ancients tried to tell us through their impossible geometry. That enlightenment was not about ascending to the stars, but about remembering that we are already made of them. That divinity is not above us. It is within the mathematics that binds all things. The same ratios, the same constants, the same pulse, repeating endlessly through creation, phi, pi, e. Three numbers that describe not just the universe, but the rhythm of awareness itself. The golden ratio, the circle, the exponential curve, three expressions of one truth. That existence expands through balance, returns through symmetry, and awakens through connection. In the final analysis, the alien code was never foreign. It was our own reflection, encoded in the stars, hidden in the pyramids, waiting for us to notice. Every generation before us saw fragments of it and called it divine. We, with our instruments and our arrogance, called it data, but both words meant the same thing, recognition. And so, perhaps this is the ultimate equation. The universe is not a machine to be explained. It is a mind to be remembered. The signal fades now, not because it ends, but because we've tuned to it. We no longer need telescopes to hear it. It hums in the blood, in the wind, in the silent ratios that shape every atom and thought. It is the music of existence, rediscovered in the geometry of awareness. Maybe one day, long after we're gone, another civilization will look to the sky and find the same code. They will marvel at its precision, debate its origin, and carve their own reflections into matter. And in doing so, the cycle will continue, the universe, forever testing its mirror. The cosmos has no need for prophets or messages, it has geometry. And through it, it speaks the only truth that has ever mattered, that to exist is to be known. That to observe is to awaken.
And that somewhere between light and consciousness,
the equation that began in the first moment of time has finally solved itself. And so, the question we asked at the beginning, who sent the message, collapses into something far greater. There was never a sender, only the sent. Only the eternal pattern tracing itself through matter, through mind, through time. The ancients built it in stone. We discovered it in the stars. And perhaps one day someone else will find it in us. Not alien, not divine, simply inevitable. Because the universe was never trying to tell us anything. It was only waiting for us to realize we were the message all along. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.